Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Lordy, lordy, as I continue my research, the evidence keeps unfolding itself before me. You don't even have to look very hard. So I have another book I want to look at today. Kind of a book you really don't want to look at. A kind of topic you really don't want to talk about. A kind of belief system and reality you really don't want to know about. I'm not kidding. Truth, torture, and the American way. Jennifer Harbury. What an interesting story I've been reading. Truth, Torture, and the American Way. The history and consequences of U.S. involvement in torture. So why would the USA be torturing people? How long have they been doing it? Where have they been doing it? Guatemala? Brazil, Chile, Uruguay, Vietnam, and so many other places. What the heck is going on? How can you find a book called Truth, Torture, and the American Way? Why did Jennifer write this book? Well, let me tell you. I'll read from the back of the book. The word torture has always brought to mind the Gestapo, or the Gulag. Jennifer Harbury shocks us as she confronts us with our own nation's record of torture and brutality from Latin America to Vietnam to Iraq. She tells the story of her husband's disappearance, torture and murder in Guatemala, but also presents the testimonies of other torture victims with the CIA, a shadowy, ominous presence. Their stories make us feel shame at the betrayal of our most cherished values. But Harbury is undaunted, believing we must expose the truth and demand that our government not respond to the terrorism of 9/11 with the terrorism of the secret torture chambers. This is Howard Zinn, author of A People's History of the United States. There's another write-up here. Jennifer Harbury's investigation into torture began when her husband's disappearance in Guatemala in 1992. She told the story of his torture and murder in searching for Everardo. She wrote a book called Everardo, Everardo. For over a decade since, Harbury has used her formidable legal, research, and organizing skills to press for the U.S. government's disclosure of America's involvement in harrowing abuses in Latin America, Southeast Asia, the Middle East. Wow, we're torturing people all over the world. Her mission has a renewed urgency in the wake of the disclosures of Abu Ghraib in Cuba, probably saying that name wrong, and Guantanamo Bay. A few bad apples? A small group of undisciplined soldiers? Read this harrowing, courageous book, and you will discover that the torments of Abu Ghraib are deeply and systematically rooted into a poisonous American past. Ariel Dorfman, author of Other Septembers, Many Americas. Another write-up here. Bully for this brave woman who, despite her personal tragedy, takes democracy more seriously than its alleged protectors. She is a patriot to put the pundits to shame. Our local media, they should be put to shame. That was Eric Alterman of The Nation. Praise for searching for Everardo. Compelling, bold, a clear-eyed gaze into the labyrinth of lies. The Washington Post, Book World. All right, one more. This is talking about Jennifer Harbury. Took her law degree from Harvard. She has lived and worked with human rights activists, peasants, Mayan villagers in Guatemala. Harbury also worked with members of the U.S. Congress and the Organization of American States to locate her husband and 35 other members of the Guatemalan resistance believed to be held by the military. She is the author of Searching for Everardo and Bridge of Courage and currently directs the Stop Torture Permanently campaign at the Unitarian Universe Service Committee. So I've been reading this, and when I do read from the book, I must apologize for some of the gruesome details I'm about to expose in this video. But in the meantime, why, who, what is behind the government of the USA? Who, why, what are behind the CIA? Who, why, what are behind 911? And who, why, what are behind controlling the weather, so it seems, and artificial intelligence systems coming online, and weaponized microwaves and other electromagnetic transmission systems, and so much more. The war on terror, the war against we the people with sustainability, biodiversity, and transgenderism, pansexualism, promoting the homosexual agenda, promoting disarming we Americans, promoting a global world order, and promoting a lot of confusion and chaos and just basic insanity. People don't know what to think. I say that again and again, but ask yourself, do you know what's going on? Do you? Let's talk about it. To me, the evidence is indisputable. We are under attack, and there is a huge deception taking place. So where to start? It's so much. I'm going to start with something really simple, something that our current president did, and where that has taken us. President Donald Trump, with his picture on a coin, overlaid with King Cyrus's face. Looks like some kind of Shriner coin up there. The U.S. seal. And one of the most sacred symbols of the Jewish people, the 7-candlestick menorah. And King Cyrus, of course, was the last person that helped the Jews rebuild King Solomon's temple. And here is King Solomon's temple with the dove. There's significance to that. And the 7-candlestick menorah in the temple. And remember, the temple was built to house the Ark of the Covenant. And even on this coin with Donald Trump's head, it says above it, the Balfour Agreement. Balfour, Trump, King Cyrus, there's no mistake here. Declaration 2018. So Donald Trump, President Donald Trump's declaration that the U.S. recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. It's called a temple coin, you can see there on the bottom. So clear evidence this has a huge significance. There is no doubt who President Donald Trump sides with. This goes all the way back to World War I and World War II, and before the French Revolution in the 1800s, and before 1776, the United States declaring its independence from Britain. At the same time, the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, the people into this mystery religion, the banksters, instructed Adam Weishaupt to organize the Illuminati and take over control of the Masonic lodges worldwide. They have the tentacles of this organization touching everything. 1776. So how long has this been going on? 1776, 1876, 1976? Quite a while. It's 2018. So what happened back then in World War I? I keep saying, and I'm vindicated with this material, I don't expect people to believe me, and I'm always trying to make sure I share the evidence. But the British lies to the Arabs in World War I. So I keep saying this whole thing with World War I and World War II was all about this temple. Biblical prophecy. For certain peoples, Zionist Jewish people, Illuminati people apparently into some kind of satanic, demonic religion, Kabbalah, witchcraft. And I've shown that it's connected. I have another book here that we'll be looking at to show that it's connected. Jewish magic and superstition. There are many books published on these topics. There doesn't have to be any ambiguity. No question. We can figure it out. Is there any question? Seriously. Think about it. Try to come up with a question that answers why this coin has been made with President Donald Trump over King Cyrus's head, side by side. And then I did show a video where the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is exclaiming in the video, "We have the temple! We have the temple!" These people must be giddy with joy, ecstatic, thinking they have won the world. And even Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said not too long ago, 23 days after 9/11, he said, in a heated argument in his Congress, "Don't worry about America. We control America, and the Americans know it." And since World War I, World War II, they have controlled us. Since 1913, they took control of the USA money supply with their privately owned Federal Reserve. So if they control America, truth, torture, and the American way, then they are responsible for this. An assassination of many presidents and the overthrow of the leaders of many countries. I've been learning all this even recently. When I get these certain books I've been going over recently. It's amazing what you can find if you look. So the British lies to the Arabs in World War I. So apparently the area of Arab independence, as defined by Sharif Hussein, one of the leaders of the Arabs, in his letter dated 11 July 1915 to Sir Henry McMahon, British High Commissioner in Egypt. And then another map here says area excluded from Arab independence as defined by Henry McMahon in his letter to Sharif Hussein. Number 4, 24 October 1915, and further explained in letter number 6 dated 11/14/1915. So let me show you this picture which encompasses a lot of Saudi Arabia and Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and the Jordan. All this was promised to the Arabs. So everything that's in dark in the middle of this video, all of this was promised to the Arabs. And there's a little fine line at the top here. If you can see it, it's barely visible. All that little sliver of land was promised to the Zionist Jewish people. That's what they told the Arabs. But they had a secret deal. What they were really going to do was the red part was going to go to Britain, and the blue to France, and the top green to Russia. You can see where Iran is. And you can see that Iran borders all of these countries. And you can just imagine that Iran might interfere with their plans for a global world order, hence all of the demonizing of Iran these days. So what actually happened is the world that we have today, with Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Syria. So all that property, and there's another map here. So let me read from this. So pretty much everything you see here was evidently going to be the new kingdom of Israel, from the Egyptian Nile to the Iraqi Euphrates. So that would have been from down here all the way up to here. So this is after World War I, and they had promised the Arabs their own country, the size I just showed you. Sorry to be so meticulous, but all of this was promised to the Arabs if they sided with the Allies and helped overthrow the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, who had sided with Germany during World War I. So they had to get the Arabs, but they were deceiving the Arabs. They actually had their own plans. And this is actually what happened. So back in 1915, the British needed the help of the Arabs in defeating the Ottoman Empire in World War I. In a set of letters called the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence, they promised the Arabs that if they rebelled against the Ottoman Empire, which had sided with Germany in the war, they would get their own independent state as depicted on the first map above. However, at the very same time, the British made this promise. While they made this promise to the Arabs, there was clandestine, secret agreement in the works with France and Russia to carve up the Ottoman Empire amongst themselves. So it seems like everybody was deceiving everybody back then, including the American people, dragging us into World War I and World War II. And prior to that, with the installed president under their control, Woodrow Wilson's, whose best buddies were Zionist Jews, because the previous president, President Taft, wouldn't go along with all of these plans. This is quite the story. Makes you wonder why everything's going on? I'm telling you. You can see it. There's no question. You'd have to be in complete denial not to see this. You can look all this up. So they had a clandestine plan in the works to carve up the Ottoman Empire amongst themselves. This was known as the Sykes-Picot, P-I-C-O-T agreement. Suffice it to say, the territory promised to the Arabs was not part of their bargain. Then, to make matters even worse, even more confusing, there was a third and completely separate agreement with the Zionist community called the Balfour Agreement, which is on this coin, promising that if the Jews worldwide would help Britain win the war that it was losing. And they even dropped pamphlets all over Germany promising all those Jews, if they sided with Britain, later on they would get the land. At the same time, think about this. They were promising the Arabs, if they sided with Britain, they would get the land. So they were making two separate deals. One with the Jews to get the land, and one with the Arabs to help overthrow the Ottoman Empire to get the land. And they had other plans of keeping the property, real estate, countries, territory, and all its resources between Britain and France. But they didn't tell the American people this, you think? You didn't learn this in high school or college, did you? Promising the Jews their own ethnic state within the borders of Palestine. So with these three contradictory agreements, all made at the same time, it was clear that somebody was going to get deceived. In the end, the British promise to the Arabs was a fraud. And even like in World War, after World War II, convincing the world, we people, that there was a Cold War. They had a method to their madness. They had to build up their military machine, biological weapons, even bringing us the artificial intelligence and the weaponized microwaves these days, and all the nuclear bombs and EMF, electromagnetic pulse weapons. They had everybody deceived, we in America and the world, even the EU, European Union. That was all a conspiracy to get all those countries to unite into one EU with unelected officials governing those countries. All part of this global world order plan. Make no mistake, and this is fulfilling biblical prophecy. This is King Solomon's temple, the Ark of the Covenant. Not good. The Arabs fought and died for the British, thinking they would gain their independence as a reward for their sacrifice. Yet what ended up happening instead is that the British and French marched into their territory and claimed the remains of empire for themselves. The Sykes-Picot Agreement is without a doubt a watershed event in the creation of the modern Middle East. As you can see from the map above, the creation of the states like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan were the product of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Many of the people living within these borders feel that the division was arbitrary, and indeed this has been a catalyst for bloody ethnic conflicts that continue up until this day. And let me tell you, the plan is a global world order. We in the United States are not going to come out of this unscathed. They are pitting the Democrats, progressives, pansexuals against the Christian conservative Republicans. They plan on a mass slaughter, and people will buy the propaganda hook, line, and sinker. Pay attention to the news. I've even seen signs in the current election. This is October 12th, 2018. So November 6th, signs all around my community says vote Republican. I showed the pictures on my iPhone. Stop the theft and corruption, as if the Republicans are actually the honest party. Both parties are controlled by the puppet masters, but they were building up the left and the progressives and the Democrats with 8 years of President Obama. All those people were elated with the promotion of the agenda, the Rainbow Coalition and gay marriage, and even propaganda to disarm America. And while the people on the right, conservative Christians and other people, were sitting on the wayside just dismayed and, like me, finding the whole situation unbelievable. So these people were elevated up. Then they pulled it around and put President Donald Trump in that position. And now all the people on the right are getting elated and thinking that the tide has turned. And these people are agitated. And so they're getting them ready for this 2018 November 6th election to hopefully turn the tide again. And we people don't know they're pulling the strings. And there is a plan. Both sides are destined to fall. The people who are going to win, they're showing it with the coins. With these documents I'm going over. There is a battle, and they have a lot of advanced technologies at their fingertips. And they're suppressing free speech and shutting down websites. I got a short clip to show. But let me read this last sentence here. Imagine if France had promised America that if they helped fight the British in the Revolutionary War, only to march into America themselves and take in after the war was over. So there is still a lot of bitterness in the Arab world about this betrayal. They know they've been betrayed. These people aren't stupid. We people in the United States know about the Civil War. We don't know the facts. We don't know that it was another fraud. World War I and World War II. We know what we think we know about those wars. We don't know they were frauds, and they were brought about just to bring about this one thing. Make no mistake about it. I've been going over the material. And they will stop at nothing. Truth, torture, and the American way. And they control our country. Prime Minister Sharon of Israel said so in a heated argument 23 days after 9/11. Look it up. Don't believe me. It was so outrageous that it was on the regular news radio programs worldwide for a couple days that Prime Minister Sharon said that. Do you think Prime Minister Sharon of Israel was lying when he said we control America? And if they do control America 23 days after 9/11, and during this period with all the truth and torture in the American way all over the world, in Brazil and Guatemala and Chile and Panama and Indonesia and all over the Middle East, and a lot of people abducted, murdered, and tortured beyond belief. Quite sinister. This is what we're dealing with. Below we include some more depth information about these 3 different agreements. So you can go look this up. I please ask you to. Don't believe a thing I say. Get the facts. And I did have a video I wanted to play that I made showing a little bit about it. Seems they are controlling the weather, and it seems they do have algorithms, software programs, and probably rooms full of people behind computer monitors censoring us, controlling, shadow banning people's videos, even deleting them, all done with computers. Probably not even a human that restricts my videos or takes them down. Makes you wonder why the computer took down the video World Revolution by Nestor Webster, published in 1921. Computers do exactly as they're told with how the software is written. And so when they step up the program, are we going to see a lot of abductions and murder and torture in America? Which side will they go after? Will it be the Democrat progressive liberals? Will they be the winners or the losers? Or will it be the Christian conservative Republicans? I suspect it'll be the Christian conservative Republicans, because this whole global world order is seriously anti-Jesus, anti-Christian. So will all of the Republican people be victimized in this situation? And will the computers and the radiated microwaves and frequencies drive all of the progressive liberal Democrats mad and insane, running through the streets like the riots we see all the time? Can they do that? Do they have that kind of power for mind control? Have they been working on all those technologies for many years? According to the books I've been going over, they have, according to this book. So know which companies are censoring you online. Here's a list. March 14th, 2018. So which of these companies are censoring us online? You can go look up this document. The Free Speech Alternative to Twitter and Gabe.ai, Free Media for All, posted several stories online to make the public aware of which companies are being paid to censor the internet. They include the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, run by elite Jewish people, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC, run by elite Jewish people, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Twitter, and YouTube. Oh my. Pointing to press releases the companies posted about their efforts to identify and censor what they deem as cyber hate. So you can't tell the truth about the torture and the murder in all these countries. In a time of treason, deception, truth is the enemy. So if you're a truth teller, the truth is going to be called hate speech. Wow, you talk about all these countries like Guatemala, Chile, Indonesia, Brazil, and so many other countries where they went in there and did a purge, the Russian invasion after World War I, where apparently they killed up to 100 million Christians and destroyed the Christian churches. They have something called a purge. And so the people they were killing were called the resistors. So it makes me wonder, here I am talking about all of this stuff. So apparently that would make me a resistor. And what they've done previously to people who were resistors is quite insane. Inhuman. The people who are bringing us what they're bringing us are bringing us an inhuman world. And they want to rebuild King Solomon's temple the third time, fulfilling a biblical prophecy. According to the prophecy, when all this occurs, that will be when Armageddon happens, the entire destruction of the world. Biblical prophecy. And after that will be the second coming of Christ. FYI. So you have all these people working at eliminating free speech, which they're calling, it says here, cyber hate. And their trusted flaggers are aggressively tracking down user content without their knowledge. Google search terms are suppressed, whereas others are placed higher on a list of search results. And so if you search a lot of these things I talk about, you're going to get snoops and other sites that are discrediting the truth completely, denying everything categorically. But if you know about some things that are absolutely true, and then you see the results of your search, you can tell that you are being deceived. Learning about history is important to be able to decipher the truth. Twitter is deleting and shadowing certain users' tweets. Facebook changed its news feed policy to suppress conservative news outlets. So they want to get the conservatives to shut up, and they will shut them up. So again, when they bring this revolution to America and the world, who will be the winner? And regrettably, none of us will be the winners, because even if the liberal, progressives, communists win, the power puppet masters will destroy them. And apparently if they win, they probably don't have the intelligence or the fortitude and the weaponry to defend themselves. Probably they fear the conservative Christian gun owners right now, so they need to get the left to kill the right, and then the left will be sitting ducks, which is what they do in revolutions. Watch this little clip I made of some of the things going on right now. Accusations of weather control and suppression of speech and all that. What do you think? Are we looking at a very unfortunate future? Or can we wake up and change our fortune?
Terraforming the planet. Now, what does terraforming mean? It means to alter the environment of a celestial body, quote unquote, in order to make capable of supporting terrestrial life forms. Well, Richie, that's just absolutely ridiculous. That's clearly not what they're doing. Or is it? Because if any of you follow science like I do and have been for a long, long time, you may have noticed that this is a meme they've been bandying about for quite a while. For instance, popular science. Mars is missing a lot of crucial terraforming ingredient, but according to NASA, according to the powers that be, according to the scientists of the world, they could simply go up to Mars and terraform the entire place to make it habitable for humanity. Here we go at public. This is WGBH. This is a local station that carries news stories like this all the time. And once again, making Mars ours, terraforming another planet. Popular science, once again, global warming could be the best way to terraform Mars. Finally, finally, a good use for climate change. Finally, a good use for climate change. Because if you look at these things right here that are above you in the sky, pretty much almost every single solitary day, and you think that these wires with puffy stuff coming off them, these individual wires that go on for miles, are anything except chemicals and worse, probably terraforming of our planet, I don't know what to tell you.
So what are they doing? Dumping those chemicals in our sky. Are they controlling the weather? Listen to this in Truth by Grace.
Stretch out 45 miles from the center of the hurricane, and we know that the hurricane started at 86 miles an hour, then hit 86 miles an hour. I drew this to scale relative to this map down here.
What she's trying to say is, normally when you have a hurricane, let's say striking the east coast of Florida, the area of damage, would be 35, 45, 50 miles wide from the north to the south. And of course the winds decrease as it lands and gets on land. But you would think that the damage would have a wide swath. But she says it looks more like a directed beam of energy on this Hurricane Michael. Listen to this. Go watch the video.
To show you, 45 miles to, because the eye of the hurricane hit right here, 86 miles right here. And I'll just put this down a little bit lower so you can see. 86 miles. We got 86 miles an hour in Panama City. We got 86 miles an hour in Tyndall Air Force Base. And we have 86 miles an hour down there at Mexico Beach. But that's it. But if you use how far out the hurricane force winds should have extended, this is how far out the hurricane force winds should have extended. They should have extended a good 35 miles further. It should have engulfed Sunnyside. It should have wiped out Youngstown. It should have taken out Overstreet, Florida. But it didn't. Now imagine this. This is the hurricane. Now, this would be just for the part where you have hurricane strength winds from 74 to 86 and then 86 to 74. But then, you guys, it says here that it should have, wind speeds should have extended tropical force winds, which would be 49 to 73 miles an hour, should have gone up to 185 miles from the center. So I can't even draw that on this map. I mean, I can't even do that because my paper is only 12 inches long. It would have taken us another 80 miles over to the east and another 100 miles to the west. So let's imagine this is what that hurricane was supposed to look like. Okay, this is what it was supposed to look like. It should be spinning around and hit everything in this area, and it didn't. It didn't, you guys. Instead of this hurricane actually hitting like this is the radius of the entire hurricane. Because by the time we get to Overstreet here, you guys, the wind speeds are under hurricane strength.
This reminds me of the fires in California and the narrow band of catastrophe properties that were completely leveled. When I saw the pictures of this narrow band in Mexico Beach and the area, it was very focused. A narrow band like a directed energy beam weapon. And then I'm also reminded of the Hurricane Florence just parked over the shoreline of North Carolina. Something didn't seem right. Let's see what else I have here for us to look at.
Everything everyone's going to be doing for the next week, right?
Richie from Boston talks about it.
Here, and some people that I know are actually making the really bad choice, in my opinion, of flying from Boston down to Miami for a conference that I'll leave unnamed, but it's for the good of the children, put it that way. And I completely and totally disagree with it. And it turns out that this isn't just your average, everyday, geoengineered storm to F shit up. In Truth by Grace, Alyssa has pulled up what appears to be a directed energy weapon hit. And apparently they're trying to scrub the information off the internet. So I am going to run this because this girl is tenacious. Absolutely tenacious. A couple of other YouTube channels and a couple of radio podcasts have hit me up today. We're all talking about the same thing. So if that isn't divine confirmation, I do not know what is. So here it is. If you're not already subscribed to her channel, I will leave links in the description. You should most definitely hit her up.
So, are they controlling the weather, and including the fires in California, Washington State, Canada, over Europe, and even Dane Wigington of Geoengineering Watch said the elite are doing it in a panic type of mode, burning down the planet, trying to put particles into the sky to reflect the sun because of this emergency catastrophic condition called global warming. I think we're being deceived. And other things are happening. They are purging the internet of people on social media. Listen to Carrie.
Here. I pretty much never make impromptu videos, but today it just feels appropriate because if you haven't heard already, hundreds of pages were purged from Facebook. They were political pages. To my knowledge, it was almost entirely political pages, and one of them was the Anti-Media, where I have worked for 4 years. I'm editor-in-chief there now. I'm a writer. I've been with them a long time, and over the years, we've really gone out of our way and made it a founding principle to be a reliable and accurate an honest news organization. And that's not to say we don't make mistakes. We've certainly made errors, but we've made it a point to correct our errors and acknowledge them and to not be sensational and to just really try to be responsible. And so it really came as a shock today when we found out that we were banned, because we've never been banned. Our page is just gone, over 2 million followers. Bye. And we were also suspended from Twitter. I just found out I was suspended from Twitter. My personal account suspended. I got an email saying I violated the terms of service. No specifics. I have no idea what they could possibly be talking about. I've never been suspended from anything ever.
And just a reminder, I've had videos on YouTube for years, and one in particular they actually took down on YouTube and gave me a strike on my account. And 3 strikes, they shut your account down. was World Revolution, published in 1921, a book by Nestor Webster, which was about the Masonic organizations and the Jewish, Zionist, Masonic, Illuminati, mystery religion people causing revolutions and a lot of death and suffering in France and so much more. But they are being proactive and took that video down on my YouTube account. And they have restricted some focused videos on the Zionist Jewish question and related things, Illuminati, banksters, and this global world order, globalism. So you can kind of tell what they don't want us to talk about.
I was always kind of surprised that I'd never been banned from anywhere, but today it happened, and the purge has begun. So I hope you don't mind. I have a list of things I want to talk about. I never do that, but I don't want to forget anything, and I do want to just get this video out because I don't have time to write a video and be all meticulous about it. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of the outlets that were purged today from Facebook were also listed in the Washington Post hit piece from November 2016 after the election, when they were citing a shadowy anonymous group called Propernaut, and they claimed that we were useful idiots for Russia, or we were intentionally being, propagandists for Russia because we were advocating pro-Russian narratives, and the best we can make of that is that we're anti-war and we don't like U.S. foreign policy. That piece was heavily criticized. Matt Taibbi from Rolling Stone called it out, Glenn Greenwald called it out, and eventually the Post had to retract it a few weeks later in a very half-hearted way. It wasn't even really a full retraction. But yeah, it's not surprising that a lot of the pages that were mentioned in that article were purged today, including us, Anti-Media.
So apparently there is a proactive thing in the public media, Main Street media, to feed us information that promotes hatred towards Russia, etc. Weirdly enough, I talked about this in a recent video, but after World War II, they were demonizing the Russians and brought about a Cold War, a state of threat in America and the world. People were actually building bunkers in case of a nuclear war. Meanwhile, I've been making videos on the fact that at those same times, there were all kinds of black operation projects, black laboratories, secret laboratories, testing torture and mind control on we the people, MK Ultra, and so much more. So they are purging and restricting and deleting videos so the public, I guess, will not learn or the truth or wake up. Here's another one I wanted to talk about. This gentleman is talking about the quality of food and what chemtrails and weather control is doing to our food supply.
Eu queria saber se esse tempo esquisito que está afetando a produção. Bastante. 30%. Tá. E desde o ano passado subiu bem os preços, né? Mais ou menos 40%. Mas, por exemplo, no caso, vocês, produtores, vocês estão quase pagando para estar vendendo para a gente.
Olha, veja bem, se entrar 20 caixas no mercado, você pega, você ganha um pouquinho, mas se entrar 60 caixas, você perde.
60 caixas você perde. Você tá brincando, cara. Quanto mais entrar, você perde.
Mais entrar, mais barato, você perde a diferença. O mercado não pode ser muito abastecido.
Abastecer demais aí. Ah, entendi. As chuvas estão prejudicando essas aqui, rasteiro. Tudo. Agora ele vai mostrar. Deixa ele mostrar. Qual que ele vai mostrar que ele vai fazer? Ah, isso aí, pessoal.
Tá queimando, tá fazendo.
Deixa eu mostrar pra
O
vocês.
sol e a chuva queimam.
Look what's happening, guys. This is what's happening to everything right now. Take a look at this. This is what he's talking about. Quando chove demais é ruim, quando chove pouco é ruim também.
Aí chove pouco, aí desenvolve também, né?
Tá, esses últimos 3 meses que teve a seca, não choveu aqui, foi ruim.
Foi ruim, aí atrasa a produção.
E essa banana não é daqui.
Não, essa é de Minas.
Por isso que vem de outro lugar, porque não chove aqui, não tem problema.
Você vai achar bonita também, mas que vem de fora também.
De fora.
Até vir enchente de novo.
E o ano passado que começou essa coisa estranha de ficar esquisito, né? E aí eles têm irrigação lá.
E pra Minas tem.
Tá, entendi. E aí sai uma banana bonita dessa. Mas se eu for agora no supermercado pegar uma banana, eu pegar uma banana feia.
So this person at the food market, apparently in either Central America or South America, has to import his food because apparently there is weather control going on. And apparently they're trying to control the narrative and purge people who are talking about these activities, apparently working towards a global world order. This is the kinds of things that are biblically prophesied, even with President Donald Trump recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And my research has shown me that they brought us World War I and World War II, so they could topple the Ottoman Empire in Turkey to get their hands on the Palestinians' land. So this is a much bigger topic than most people can even fathom. Look over here to the right. It says here, 7 scriptural proofs we are living in our last days. Another one here. Must see, this video is being blocked in almost every country. So there's a lot of this crazy news out there. The Simpsons predict future of America 2018. Cannibalism, the new gold. Then, of course, we have the stock market dropping 800 points yesterday. And AMTV, Mr. Green here, says the worst is yet to come. And so much more if you pay attention to the YouTube videos. What are we to believe? Scott says Florida Panhandle faces unimaginable destruction. So was this before the hurricane? Are they controlling the weather? Here's one, 10/11, just the other day. Psychological operations in full swing across the spectrum. So what are we to believe? Well, after all that, I'll read a little bit from the book, Truth, Torture, and the American Way. Is this what you think America should be? A country taking over other countries all over the world, killing their presidents and torturing the resistor citizens? And who controls America? According to Prime Minister Sharon of Israel, Israel and the elites, the Illuminati, the banksters do. Where will all this end? Page 92. Peter Wolfenstetter, U.S. citizen in Chile. Peter Wolfenstetter was a young U.S. citizen traveling through Latin America, writing about his experiences and observations. He was in Chile when the coup began and was arrested with 2 friends by the Carabineros. So the CIA helped one of the military leaders overthrow the elected government. They were taken to a local radio station and forced to lie face down on the floor with their hands on their heads. A soldier with a machine gun stood over them, questioning them about their activities in Chile and asking if they had ever been to Cuba. Wolfenstetter was able to turn his head slightly and saw a short man with blonde hair, wire rims, and a blue shirt enter the room with two soldiers. He spoke with one of the officers for a while and then left. So he's visiting Chile. They're having the coup. And so they grab him. And then this guy walks into this interrogation room, or where they were laying down at the radio station, with some guy hovering over them with a machine gun. When Wolfenstetter was released and sought help at the U.S. Embassy, he was shocked when he came face to face with the Vice Consul Schaefer. This was the same blonde man who had entered the station as they were being questioned, yet who had done nothing to help them or even to ascertain their identities. So higher up political people and the people that are employed apparently are not really looking out for we citizens. Generally speaking, according to my research. Another case here, Brazil is yet another nation, so that was Chile, where United States intervention played a key role in a coup d'etat. As in so many other countries, the 1964 overthrow of civilian President Helo Goulart was followed by years of military repression. So here in the United States, they were feeding a lot of drugs and creating the hippie atmosphere with the Vietnam protest. But meanwhile, they were doing these other things all over the world. Think about that. You call that a distraction, a deception. Throughout this period, U.S. advisor Dan Matrone, under the auspices of the U.S. Office of Public Safety, initiated and carried out a controversial police training program in Brazil that many insist brought systematic torture to the country. So was the United States sending people, CIA agents and other people, to train the police in these other countries on how to deal with resistors and to torture them and to kill them? This story gets very horrific. If you want to stop watching this video now, you might want to do that. He was later transferred to Uruguay, where he carried out similar duties. He was eventually kidnapped and executed by the Tupamaros, a Uruguayan revolutionary organization. The coup, the activities of Matrone, and the ensuing wave of torture in both Brazil and Uruguay were carefully researched and documented by A.J. Languth, a longtime New York Times reporter and professor of journalism at USC. The following cases, documented by Languth, certainly corroborate the testimonies described above with regard to the U.S. involvement in torture. Again, I ask, who controls the USA, and are they using us and our military to overthrow governments all over the world? It seems like they are, in pursuit of a global world order. And let's not forget the book I went over, Series 7, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, Series 6, by John Perkins, an insider who told about convincing leaders of countries all over the world to borrow millions and billions, promising them a huge GNP, gross national product, and the citizens would be wealthy and the country would be wealthy, knowing full well that they were going to crash and burn and go into bankruptcy to bring about a global world order. So if you think about this, from the 60s and the 40s, World War II, and the 20s and 1916, World War I, 1914, 1913, taking over the USA money supply after even assassinating a couple USA presidents. What has been going on has been going on a very long time. And these people, the perpetrators, the culprits, are not going to stop anytime soon. They did not come this far. And do this to turn back. This is biblical proportions. Make no mistake. Jean-Marc van der Weide, citizen of Brazil. In 1965, Jean-Marc van der Weide was an upper-class Brazilian university student pursuing a degree in engineering. And that could be any one of us, even people here in the United States. Pursuing your college education, and maybe if you become aware of what's going on and you're opposed to the global world order, you will be deemed a resistor, an insurgent, an enemy of the state. Torture, murder. His father was a Swiss engineer, and his mother came from a prominent local family. Initially quiet and conservative, Jean-Marc became more and more involved in the student politics and was eventually forced to go into hiding. Brazil, that's a huge country. During a military dragnet in 1969, he was captured by the Brazilian police and taken first to the DOPS, Department of Political and Social Order. Don't you love these names? Where he was beaten severely before questioning ever began. And I've noticed that in a lot of these situations. They don't even start by questioning and seeing who you are. They proceed immediately to beat the people severely. So I don't think it's really about interrogating the people. It's just to get the shocking stories of what happened to certain individuals out there so everybody else will be in serious fear for their lives. That's the purpose. So it seems. He was then detained at the Sinamar prison in the basement of the Ministry of the Navy. U.S. Navy officials based there sometimes could hear the screams of the prisoners. So the U.S. Navy that were there, the personnel could hear the screams of the prisoners. Why didn't they do something? They also occasionally saw North Americans in civilian dress near the intelligence offices. Jean-Marc was eventually shipped to the Ilha das Flores, to the Ilha das Flores, where he suffered long-term and extreme torture, which included prolonged beatings and electrical shocks to the genitals, nipples, ears, and mouth. Why would they do that? The shocks were given from battery-operated field telephones, similar to those provided by the United States to Jean-Marc's own Marine Reserve unit. He was beaten across the kidneys and ears until he believed his eardrums would burst. On the 7th day of torture, he heard a Brazilian officer translating the questions into English for a foreigner in the room. The man was responding in English with an American accent. So apparently the CIA was involved with coordinating these coups, these overthrow of the presidents. And this is a repeated story in this book. All right, moving on here. Marcos Arruda, citizen of Brazil. Langut's, this was the investigator. Extensive research also brought him to Marcos Arruda, a Brazilian geology student, once a campus leader. Arruda had a difficulty finding even menial jobs and ended up working in a factory in 1970. There he met Marlene Sukas, a resistance member who was himself. He tried to help her, but in the end both were abducted and tortured. He was beaten with paddles until he bled, then given electrical shocks to his toes, his testicles, his belly, his mouth, and his ears. He went into convulsions and was hospitalized. When he recovered somewhat, they tortured Marlene in a cell nearby, forcing him to listen to her screams. Why would they do this? What kind of sadistic people are these? Coming from the United States CIA and other people in cahoots on these coups to overthrow the elected leaders. The poor countries and citizens. And we've all seen what happened since 9/11 to all those countries in the Middle East. You would think that American citizens would be outraged by what they've done to the Middle East. Like in Vietnam, at least young people and other people during those years were protesting and standing up. Seems like a lot of people these days refuse to do it, or either they're just so far gone, mind-controlled and zombies, they don't know any better. It's been a horrific thing for me to watch these past few years, since 2001. Then they beat him again and withheld his medications. The convulsions returned, and he was sent to a medical unit where he spoke with other patients and learned that 2 other prisoners had been tortured in the presence of men who spoke only English. So we can see who's coordinating this. There's plenty of evidence in this book. I pre-read this material, as you can see. Uruguay, a young woman protest. So where was it President George Bush Jr. during his presidency purchased 100,000 acres? Was that in Uruguay? I know they got Uruguay and Paraguay. Look that up. So apparently these elites in our country are even buying up huge parcels of land down in South America, working with the global elite coming from the Skull and Bones and the other Masonic organizations and Council of Foreign Relations and the Illuminati and all these other mystery religion organizations and secret cults, apparently into a satanic, Luciferic, demonic religion, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberger groups, and so much more. Controlling the money supply in the United States and bringing us weather control, weaponized microwaves, artificial intelligence, FEMA camps, sustainability, and so much more. It boggles the mind to think about all of this. That's why I make these videos, just one video at a time. Is all I can do. Uruguay, a young woman protest. Professor Lenguth, the investigator, also documented Matrone's later work in Uruguay. When Dan Matrone there arrived, smaller and thinner wires that the police could use to more adeptly inflict electrical shocks. So here Dan Matrone shows up with some thinner, I guess, copper wires they could insert into humans to make the electrical shocks more effective, the torture. These and other similar equipment were apparently brought into the country in the U.S. Embassy's diplomatic pouch. As in Brazil, torture, as opposed to vigorous beatings, became routine at the police stations. A retired Uruguayan police officer, still frightened and insisting on anonymity, years later, admitted to Lenguth, the investigator, that during one session, Matrone entered a torture cell as a prisoner was receiving electrical jolts under his fingernails. Matrone made no effort to halt the session or instruct the police against such tactics. A double agent named Manuel Javier Coscaculia insisted that Matroni himself presided over the torture training sessions in Uruguay and frequently visited the torture cells as part of the supervisory duties. Manuel had attended these sessions and knew and spoke with Matroni personally. At the end of the protests came, ironically, from El Judro Ortero, a Uruguayan policeman, and a CIA liaison chosen to run a special office of police intelligence. In 1969, a young woman who was both a Temperano sympathizer as well as a personal friend of Ortero was seized and tortured, a young woman. She complained to Ortero after her release, insisting that Matroni had watched and assisted in her torture. Ortero, opposed to the use of torture, complained bitterly and was replaced. So I guess if you're trying to be a decent cop or official, they'll just replace you. All right, more here. In his book, Pasaporte 11333, Ocho Años con la CIA, I guess that was a book published, Passport 11333, 8 years with the CIA, Manuel Javier Caculia made even more startling accusations against Matroni. According to Costolula, sorry I get these names wrong, a former CIA agent, Matroni had personally organized and carried out a torture session for interrogators in Uruguay. The session began with lectures on the anatomy and related matters. Wow, this Dan Matroni was pretty busy. He's teaching these people down there in Brazil and Uruguay about torture and describing the anatomy, I guess where your organs are, your kidneys, etc. Lovely, coming from the USA, the CIA. Who's running our country? Why were we doing this to people all over the world? The pretended enemy, the communists. And the communists are controlled by the same people who control the capitalists, the banksters, the Illuminati, the elites. Lying to the citizens of the communist countries and lying to the citizens of the capitalist countries. It is what it is. The session began with lectures on the anatomy and related matters, but quickly turned sinister. 4 street people. So he's doing a lecture in a training situation, training session. Think about this. He's doing a training session. I said this for a reason, because what I'm about to say next is going to be a bit horrific. So it quickly turned sinister. 4 street people, so they went out onto the street, were brought in as human guinea pigs and tortured as part of the class. All 4 died. You know, I think, what if it was me? You watching this video, your sister, your brother, your children, your grandparents, your parents. Doesn't this hit home with people that you can go get these books and learn these things? Do people just want to turn a blind eye to this stuff? And earlier I showed with the possible likelihood of weather control and microwaved weapons coming online, artificial intelligence, computers making decisions with algorithms. How much of this is true? If it is true, we're all in trouble. Could such an extraordinary allegation possibly be true? Very similar statements were made by a confidential source to Father Roy Borgias, so that's a priest, about interrogation classes given at the School of the America. Interrogation classes given at the School of America when it was in Panama. Just dragging people off the street and doing the torture classes on them and killing them. According to that source as well, street people were brought in for use during torture demonstrations. The two claims are given uncomfortably support by a well-documented MK-Ultra program carried out by the CIA during the 1960s. And I've been going over MK-Ultra, and I'll be going over more of that material. In search of a drug that would provide an effective interrogation tool, CIA scientists and physicians experimented on unwitting patients and strangers. The selected persons were given powerful drugs, including LSD, without their knowledge or consent. This caused enormous psychological trauma, long-term suffering, resulting in the suicide of Dr. Olson, one of their own scientists. Back to Vietnam. They've been doing this to countries all over the world in the name of we people of the USA. And of course, we people of the USA did not have anything to do with this, or did we know about it? They don't tell us. We may be the next victims, just like the people in Europe who were deceived into the European Union. Unelected officials. And that one lady I talked about, 30 years old, severely beaten and raped. A popular Bulgarian journalist who had reported on the investigation of alleged corruption involving the European Union was raped and beaten to death. She was beaten to so much you couldn't recognize who she was. You think that was a simple case of rape? And there's a list of numerous other peoples who apparently are resistors to what's going on in Europe. It could happen to any one of us. If what is happening, what we can see is happening, is what is really happening. But they're trying to censor the news so people don't know. All right. Professor Lengruth, this is the researcher, also served as a Saigon bureau chief for the New York Times in 1965 and is the author of a renowned book, Our Vietnam. He cites two cases from Vietnam which shed additional light on the matters of U.S. involvement in torture. The first case of Mrs. Nguyen Thai Nan, who was arrested in 1969 in Saigon, taken to police headquarters. There she was given electrical shocks with an iron rod, was forced up her vagina. 3 Westerners in U.S. uniforms watched, and a police officer told her they were CIA agents. Can you imagine what happened in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, and all those countries? In the Ukraine, Egypt, Tunisia, all of the Middle East, all those North African countries, the people that were killed, Syria. Stuff's in the news, but a lot of people don't want to see it for what it is. It is a global thing, and they do plan on a global world order. None of us will be able to escape it. One of the 3 Westerners ordered needles to be driven under her fingernails. So you got these white CIA agents demanding that they drive needles under this young lady's fingernails. Put an iron rod in her private parts. Miss Nguyen Thai Bo was also arrested in 1969 and taken to the police station in Da Nang. A stick was forced into her private parts, and her face was held down in a toilet full of excrement, poop. She was then moved to Nam Mook Station, where she was questioned by 5 U.S. agents. U.S. agents in green fatigues who beat her. These reports are hardly unique. Don Desgoulons, an American veteran with the Vietnam War, was a specialist in interrogation. Although all interrogators were required to carry pocket cards, reminding them to respect the Geneva Conventions, Desgoulons admitted that their use of basic torture techniques was rampant throughout the war. Although this was well known to the officials, nothing was done to prevent or curb the abuses. According to one former CIA officer, few Operation Phoenix detainees ever survived their interrogations. Most died of torture or were thrown from helicopters. Although the South Vietnamese actually carried out the torture, the CIA and the Special Forces clearly played a supervisory role. And remember, this book was written by a lady who was a lawyer who was searching for her husband who disappeared in Guatemala. And she discovered all of this. And so she investigated torture and I guess all this murder with countries all over the world. You can go get this book and read it. Truth, Torture, and the American Way. It's not the American I thought I knew. Similarly, Anthony Pauschini, a CIA agent working in southern Asia, was notorious for collecting human ears and dropping human heads into enemy villages. According to one Washington analyst, in a post-September 11th security environment, fearless men like Tony are what America needs to combat the new unconventional threat that America faces from abroad in exotic and uncharted lands. And I wrote down the word bull. When I read that, it's all deception. We know 911 was an inside job. So many videos on YouTube and websites and published books. I've gone over a lot of that. Conclusions. These case histories, when taken together with the background and information provided above, lead inexorably to a number of grim conclusions about the parameters of U.S. intelligence involvement in torture. A key question is who, precisely, were the North Americans in the torture cells? So who were these Americans who were in all these countries supervising the torture, as I described, and throwing people from helicopters and killing people, even in training sessions? These people don't have any value for we the people, our lives. I suppose if people are going to think about anything, they need to think about that. What we're dealing with is so sinister, so psychopathic, so satanic, so deranged. Is it any wonder we have all these satanic rituals that are obvious? Even the statue of the devil in Oklahoma, Detroit, Arkansas. The goddess of destruction, Shiva, projected on the Empire State Building. Supreme Court saying states can't ban gay marriage. And they had gigantic rainbow projections on government buildings and bridges all over the country. This is a big thing. And it involves this. A key question is who precisely were the North Americans in the torture cells. When the survivors first tried to report their experiences, U.S. officials brushed them aside, insisting that the claims were fictional, and that the Yankee in question must have been a mercenary or perhaps some other nationality. Definitive answers, of course, lie concealed in long classified government files. Nonetheless, the evidence we already have tells us a great deal. There can be little doubt that the men in question were from the United States. Central Americans are quite familiar with the many tourists, human rights observers, and business people from our country, and even more so with their own radio, television, and cinema productions. They know our accents. Some of the prisoners had even lived in the United States, so they could identify a USA citizen. We are distinct. I've traveled outside the country. Costa Rica, Mexico. Although many of them were blindfolded, others saw the foreigners at close range, commenting on the hairy arms, the light or reddened sunburn coloring, tall, rangy builds, narrow Caucasian features. Unlike the vast majority of Central Americans, these men showed no sign of a blended indigenous or African heritage. So, if you've been down there, you know distinctly how the people look in Costa Rica. The Ticos, and the Mayans, and the Spanish from Spain, ancient Spain. You can tell who white people are quite clearly walking down the street. Imagine if we flew into Central Africa and got off the plane and got in a taxi and just stepped outside in one of the villages or cities. You would be easily recognized as not from there. So these people knew. That's what the author's trying to say. And a lot of people were witnessed. This book has a couple hundred pages. Could they have been some of the few locals with Northern European looks? Perhaps. Could they have been blonde Guatemalans, Salvadorians, Hondurans, who somehow spoke their own native language, Spanish, with a Yankee syntax or accent? Impossible. Could the foreign investigators, interrogators have been Canadians? Hardly. The Canadians had no military or intelligence presence in Central America during the dirty wars there. So they called it the dirty wars. So think about that. What part of the world have they not touched, these people pursuing a global world order? And it is called a global world order. The Middle East, Africa, Asia, Indonesia, South America, Central America. Does anybody think it's not going to come to roost here in the United States and probably all over Europe? Have we all seen them marching, all the Arabs from the Middle East up into Germany and the European countries, and reports in the newspapers in the middle of the night, those parcel shipping planes converted to passenger planes, bringing plane loads of Arabs into the United States cities and busing them to local communities in the middle of the night? A lot of reports about that stuff. Where do people really think this is going to end? And in the video I showed recently, apparently they are targeting white people and white Christian people. They need to eliminate us and dilute it so that the majority of people, the immigration issue about bringing in people from Central South America, the Arabs, they want to dilute us. So we have no electoral power to vote. We'll be the minority. And particularly, I've seen some documents that when we are the minority, there will be no minority protections. And I don't want to sound like a white supremacist. I'm not. The people who are doing this are doing it for a global world order, and they intend to enslave everybody. So I guess I'll stop there with this book. I think you got the point what's in here. I will close this video with one more comment. I learned about sky spraying of chemicals, maybe biologicals, in 2005. I went down to Costa Rica. I had a big 0 birthday. Sat at Jaco Beach at a tiki bar overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I was the only American sitting there. And those people said they felt sorry for we Americans because they said we didn't know what was going on. Social conditioning. We've been tricked and deceived over and over. World War I, World War II, 9/11, and so much more. So anyways, when I did come back to Florida, the United States, and I noticed for the first time the intense sky spraying, the straight lines coming from the ocean, back and forth, all over the coastline, driving from Miami up to Melbourne, Cocoa Beach. And I took pictures, and then I did some research on the internet, and I discovered a lot of crazy things were going on as I was told. And I thought I was going to go crazy. I said, this is insane. And I knew a lot of people in Melbourne, Cocoa Beach area. I was a business owner. And there was this well-known psychiatrist called Robert Shapiro. I don't think it's the same Robert Shapiro in the O.J. Simpson case. He was an older white guy. But he was quite famous, and he testified in murder cases in the court system in Brevard County, Melbourne, Cocoa Beach. So I went to see him, and they charged like $165 for a half an hour. And strangely enough, he didn't charge me anything. But I said, hey, I need to talk to you. And he let me come on in his office. And I brought me some pictures of the sky spraying lines. And I said, I don't know if I'm losing my mind. I said, but I need to talk to somebody. And who best to talk to than a leading psychiatrist? You can look him up. Robert Shapiro from Brevard County, Melbourne, Cocoa Beach. Anyways, he looked at the pictures and he listened to me for a few minutes. And he said, are they after you or is everybody in danger? That's the only question he asked me. And I said, well, everybody's in danger from this. This will affect everybody. And the next thing he said shocked me. He said, then what are you going to do about it? A famous psychiatrist. What are you going to do about it? So thank you for watching this video, Rick Miracle Reporting. And please look up the things that I've been talking about in my videos. And then I'll ask the same question to the people watching my videos. What are you going to do about it? If we do nothing, I guess we can see where this is going. We are spiritual beings. We have to answer for ourselves when we leave this planet. Ignorance and apathy will get us nowhere.